Hello again, this time with Macmillan Pier behind me. It's a busy marina here in Provincetown where tourists come and go. My name is Ian Edwards, and it's been a real pleasure pulling together this third annual Broto conference on the web. We have hundreds of attendees from 15 countries, so thank you for joining us. A pier seemed to be a good place to introduce our final panel, Broto's Conference Takeaways. Normally we host this conference in person, and we traditionally end the sessions with a debate about the highlights and achievements. So a sense of what we can do next with these great big ideas. It's like deep time. This session number 7, our takeaways session, features a trio of Broto advisors. I'm very lucky to have them working with me. Peter Weeme is a 25-year veteran of sustainability. He is presently Vice President of Social Purpose and Stakeholder Engagement at the BC Lottery Corporation. Julia Buntaine Hoel is a conceptual artist and founding executive director from the SciArt Initiative. Her polymath background includes academic pursuits in neuroscience and fine arts. Hilairy Hartnett is a biogeochemist, and she's co-director of Planet Works at Arizona State University. And she thinks in big terms. We've been able to offer this conference at no cost. If you feel like you can support our initiatives going forward, please consider a donation. A special thanks to all of our sponsors, including the Provincetown Tourism Fund, the Provincetown Economic Development Committee, the Provincetown Cultural Council, Bay State Cruise Company, the Pallet Fund, and radio station WOMR. As with all of our sessions, the first part is pre-recorded, but we will be live with Q&A session right after that. So please get your questions ready, use the chat box for that, and we hope you find this and our other Broto 2020 sessions an inspiration for a world made sustainable. Now on for our final session, takeaways. Well, hello again, everyone. Welcome to what is the final session of Broto 2020. We are doing a takeaways panel with some advisors from Broto. Each of these fine people are very important to the development of our project initiative, and so they've offered their services for this particular panel to give some feedback on what has happened this weekend. So we have Julia Buntaine Hoel, who is founder of SciArt Initiative and an all-around polymath. Great addition to our team. Hilairy Hartnett, who's co-director of Planet Works at Arizona State University, and among a million other titles, and a thinker in the most vast of scales. And then we have Peter Weeme, who is a sustainability guru and Vice President of Social Purpose and Stakeholder Engagement at the BC Lottery Corporation in Kamloops, Canada. We have Phoenix, Arizona, and we have Boston, Massachusetts, and Provincetown, Massachusetts represented. So I wanted to start and say, for people who have just been introduced to Broto, it has been in 3 years an extended conversation with people who would not normally be in the same room with each other. Artists and scientists, people who are bringing synthesis together on an idea like climate change. And we've been doing it now for, as I said, 3 years. And the first year was about substantive collaboration. And the second year was about understanding the scale we need to create to do climate remedies. And this year we are talking about time. And as you've probably heard, Provincetown, where we are beaming in from, is celebrating 400 years commemoration of the Pilgrim's First Landing. So we have a lot to think about in time. So that was sort of what I wanted to open with. I think that it's going to be more fun for us to just launch into the questions. And each of you is on my advisory board, and I just wanted to ask you, Julia and Hilairy have been here for 3 years, and Peter's for 2. What is it about this initiative that brings you to support it? And, thank you for that, by the way. But how do you get to this place where you're sort of, involved with Broto? Julia?
Sure, I'll start. But what attracts me to Broto is the energy. The energy is positive. It's motivated. It's not doom and gloom. It's what can we do now? Let's make some decisions. Let's come up with some ideas. Let's act on things. And I think that really the way to work towards a positive future is to take kind of positive, proactive steps and not kind of stay in the zone of fear and the things which headlines, can instill in people, because the world is scary and what's happening to the world is very scary, but we all know that. So Broto for me really is a group of people that come in knowing that and then decide, let's do something with all of our skill sets, with all of our creativity. Obviously, the collaborative nature of Broto across art and science, I believe, is the only way that we're going to solve large problems is through science art collaboration and having all voices at the table. So yeah, that's really what I've enjoyed about Broto and keeps me interested in supporting it every year and coming back. It's too bad we can't all be together in person this year, because the group of people, truly wonderful. It's one of my favorite things that happens all year. So hopefully we'll see you all at Broto 4.
Yeah. Hey, Hilairy?
So thanks, Ian. And I completely agree with Julia, right? There is something about the sort of inherent sense of positivity that we are capable of making meaningful change in the world that comes out of Broto, that it not just lifts me up kind of in a personal way, but it's very inspiring about how do I think about my science in ways that I can put it out there for people like Broto, if Broto is a people,
I'll take that.
to work with, to think about, to reflect on and bounce ideas around from. When I was invited by you to the very first Broto, because of a mutual friend who was a collaborator of mine, I was like, oh, that's one of the coolest things I've ever heard of. But I had no idea what I was really going to get myself into. And
Did any of us?
But I completely agree with Julia. It's like I was so disappointed when this year's had to be moved virtual, though I think things we've been able to do this year are pretty spectacular, and we need to not lose some of the really spectacular things that we can do with this format. And I'm looking forward to the next one and the one after that and so on into the future, which I think is what our theme is this year.
Yeah, we're looking at future generations. Yeah. Peter?
I'd say a couple different things. One is, I've worked on climate-related communications and messaging and behavior change campaigns and what have you for too long, 25 plus years. And, we still haven't been successful in finding the right formula of how we reach people and how we reach people at all levels of society, from politicians and policymakers and lawmakers to business leaders and what have you. So I come to this because I'm looking for some different approaches, because I do think we need to appeal to head and heart, which I think is something that we can do with this forum. It also takes place in a highly climate vulnerable place, which is Cape Cod. So the very setting, it's like we're fighting for the survival of a place that people around the world love, because it's such an interesting artistic community, and also one of the places where colonizers first landed in the United States. So it has that sort of history associated with it. Quite frankly, Ian, you've brought a great vision to this, and it's partially because you inspire me that I wanted to get behind that vision. So, sorry to be blowing smoke up here, what. The reality is, you and the people that you've brought together and managed to enroll in this are really critically important, I think, as Julia and Hilairy have also alluded to.
Yeah, there's something special. The in-person conference really captures a kind of conversation and spontaneous brainstorm that it really characterized the in-person conference, and something we've been trying to preserve in this conference. So I appreciate the props, and it's really a wonderful project from my side in that it brings together, I would not meet incredibly brainy people who embrace the big ideas and bring climate into a different kind of space. I'm someone, not an artist, not a scientist, somebody who is intrigued by what lives between the two of them. So I'm really thrilled that you were able to be here for that, and you're supporting it, and thank you very much. So do we like this platform? I mean, we didn't have much choice.
This platform being video, or this platform being the
this
specific one that we did?
This platform being a virtual conference.
I'll just weigh in by saying I'm a believer that it certainly is a climate-friendly approach to bringing people together. It's certainly relevant from that perspective. 8 weeks now or whatever it's been that we've all been physically distant and locked down and whatever. I'm an intensely social person, and I find you just don't get the same interaction. I know Hilairy and I know Julia. I've met them before, and I have more affiliation for them because of that than had I just met them here. So, but I don't think it's necessarily an either or. We can have perhaps the odd in-person event, and we can have these video events in between. We can, there's more dialogue, there's more discussion, there's more collaboration to be had. So it's not an either or situation, but I do think bringing together those people in a room once a year, wherever that may be, does create a different kind of an experience than you can get when we're all, staring into the abyss of our camera on our computer.
Yeah, I was thinking about last year's conference, and it's hard to do mic drop events or mic drop moments in a virtual conference like this. I was thinking about a speaker last year who stood up and talked about that all we should be doing is climate art, because in 30 years we'll be talking about all art will be about grief. Now, I know Julia disagrees with this idea, and I just wanted to highlight that. But we do have that kind of moment where people are just like inspired to say something amazing. It was quite a moment, and I'm hoping that we can sort of capture some of that today. Julia.
Yeah, I totally agree. Moments like that where people get super passionate, and you feel like you're on stage in front of this audience, and things get kind of dramatic. Like that's, a really good thing about in-person conferences, because, the emotions are fueling the intellect, and you're like right in the thick of it, which creates these really special moments. Whether you agree with them or not, it doesn't matter. I think it's important. But like Peter was saying, there are some real benefits to doing things virtually. Obviously, there are benefits to doing things in person. There's no reason they have to be mutually exclusive. What I've enjoyed about the virtual conversation is the idea that the reach of Broto could be so much further. And, Broto talks a lot about scale. How do we scale solutions? How do we include more people in the conversation as attendees or audience members or what have you? This is the obvious way to do that. And so, that's the silver lining here, I think, with having been put in this situation this year, is just, our ability to have anyone, the lowest common denominator is internet access. And that's pretty great. So we'll see what happens.
Excellent. Yeah, our in-person conference, as young as it was, would attract maybe 60 to 100 people. Yeah. Right now we have hundreds of people booked, and from 15 different countries. So people that would not normally have met Broto and are going to be, have participated this year. Hilairy?
I think that there are so many advantages to both versions that going forward, it would be really important to think about, is there a way to continue this in kind of a hybrid mode where we meet in person, but it is available online? People can call in. Now, synchronicity, asynchronicity is always sort of a problem with virtual events, but I think we need to really capitalize on the reach and try not to lose the really broad appeal that the concepts and ideas that we're talking about have. Because it's a shame to think that, as spectacular as our couple of days on Cape Cod are when we get together in person, that, the room's a certain size. We can't have everybody who wants to be there, be there. And there are a lot, I know this from teaching online this semester, there's a whole slew of sort of virtual capabilities that we haven't looked into yet that we could look into.
Yeah, we pivoted in a matter of months. So it is...
which was spectacular.
Yeah, well, it took a lot of help from Narrowland and Matt's our tech person who's behind the scenes here. So it came together that way. Do you have a standout moment in this conference, this weekend of content? Did you feel there's something really sparked your imagination or interest?
So for me, I really enjoyed listening to the artists talk about their work. That was really cool. I mean, it's obviously I am art friendly as scientists go, and I go to exhibits and I very much enjoy experiencing that art, but the opportunity to have the artists talk about their work for me was really, really kind of an extremely special add-on to this format.
Yeah, because often you see art and somebody else is interpreting it for you, what it was meant or what the artist meant or whatever. You don't have the artist there telling you what was going on in their mind. And so, yeah, I think that was really interesting because all of them clearly are thinking about this issue and different ways of bringing it to life through art. And I thought that was really beneficial. I think another point is, I've never talked about time as much as, or thought about time as much as we did in this conference, right? In time frames that we as humans just don't, we tend to think in 15-minute increments or whatever, right? Our entire life is based on this sort of scientific breakdown of the day into these small slices, and we're scheduled and we're pressured and all that kind of stuff. And time in many ways is a bit of an enemy. But in this particular case, it just really opened for me kind of my mind to all the different dimensions of time. And some of those artists also talking about their work was instructive for developing a different lens into what is time and what is it. And as humans, we just don't think long term for the most part. And we need to, and I think that the conference very successfully, for anybody who has participated in one or more of the sessions, I think shone the light on that.
Yeah, I'm going to echo this. I think time is a muse is the name of the panel that happened on May 16th, and if you haven't checked it out, please do. It's going to be in replay. But for me, we have this concept at Broto where art can be an equal partner to science, and that art can inform science and broaden the perspective. And that panel just brought the big ideas, and it was really embodied what Broto is about. So I wanted to give them props for that. And I'm always impressed by the quality of our speaker. We end up getting the smartest people. So yeah, again, this year. Julia, did you have a standout?
Yeah, well, that panel was awesome to moderate because it's so easy. I just have to let them talk, and they did so well. But the artists are fabulous and super smart, really deeply thoughtful people. And one of my favorite moments from that panel was when Daniel Rinaldi talked about drawing as a form of knowledge. And as we all know, scientists used to have to draw their discoveries, especially thinking about biologists, going on a boat to a new island, Stephen Jay Gould and Darwin, et cetera, and having to draw their discoveries so that they could bring them back and share with their colleagues. And artists still have to learn how to draw from life, but if you're in the arts, which I am, that actually is not such a priority anymore, which is kind of worrisome for us old schoolers who had to have that kind of training. But thinking about drawing as a form of knowledge, but also embodying knowledge, and this was something that came up in a panel that Peter and I were on, the long-termism panel about embodied knowledge and how do you actually have someone have an experience and then carry it forward with them such that there is some sort of behavioral change. So thinking about those kinds of ideas was really fun, and I think the concept of time is so hard. We all struggled to rise to the challenge, and I think there were moments where we hit it right, but it's something that I think is worth continuing the conversation about.
For sure. So what did we learn about time and climate?
Well, I think we learned that not enough people take geology, right? It's not a class that gets taught to elementary school kids. It's not a class that people tend to take in high school. It's kind of it's an elective at the college level, and only a few people end up with sort of what I would call formal education in time from an Earth perspective, right? We get it from history or art history or any of those things. And the conversation on timefulness really set up this idea of how we should be learning how to embrace this concept of time, both to the past and to the future, right? And if that's a message that we could somehow get across through this particular Broto, I think that would be really, really valuable.
Peter, did you have a point of view on this?
What did we learn about climate and time?
Time, yeah. Or time and climate.
Or time and climate. Well, it took a long time to get to this place in terms of human intervention and the changes that we've wrought on the environment. It's probably, the most thrilling chemistry test ever committed in the history of humankind. And it's going to take time to resolve. The challenge, I think, that we have is that we don't have the luxury of a lot of time left to really fundamentally change this situation. And we've seen, for example, in the last period of time with COVID-19 that air quality has improved and global greenhouse gas emissions have declined. I think the number that I read was like 5.5%. And we need 7.5% over the next 10, 20 years per year to happen. And we had this economic disruption and social disruption, and we only got to 5.5%. That's not to discourage action. That's just to say the problem is significant. Time is limited. It took a long time to get here. And we have to think longer term in terms of taking action today is going to take time to turn that ship around. But at the same time, we don't have a lot of time to do that. So it's sort of this conflict in a sense. Like, we've got to think long term, but we got to act right now.
Right.
But I'm gonna jump in, Peter.
Sure. Challenge me.
We got to where we are over some long period of time through unintentional action. And we got 5% decrease in emissions in a short period of time, also fundamentally in a way that was not deliberate. It happened as a response to something that was outside of us.
Right.
So imagine the possibilities were we to say we are consciously going to attain 7.5% reduction in emissions every year for the next foreseeable time. And the idea that we can get as much as we got without meaning to suggests that if we were to make a decision that that's the path we wanted to take, we could do it much faster than anybody believes we could.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a way to look at it as a positive that says anybody who says, oh no, we can't possibly do that, we absolutely can do that. And if we were to do it intentionally, there would be jobs created because of it. There would be money to be made in the reduction of emission in some way, shape, or form. I think it can be spun as a really positive, look, it's not that hard to change it. And we don't have to actually have a virus to do it.
Right. Julia?
So yeah, I totally agree with Hilairy. I think, we've proven ourselves wrong that making changes is really hard. We have thankfully proven ourselves wrong because we had to turn things off. We had to shut cities down. We had to shut certain things down. And there, as Peter was saying, there have been improvements in various ways that we measure our climate. And so hopefully people in positions of power will carry some of that forward, figure out ways to do that for the benefit of our planet, for the benefit of our citizens.
I think we're at a really interesting time, right? Where because everybody is staying at home, there's a sense in which we have pressed pause a little bit on normal life, which is also interesting in the context of this discussion, right? We rarely get these moments where we have time to reflect, and time is sort of a little different than it's been the last month and a half. I think it'll be really interesting how people think about what going forward looks like once we get to, in principle, go back to the way it was, which obviously isn't how it works.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's been talking a lot about, how is it going to be once everything's, open again, when social distancing is over, once we don't have to worry as much. But we'll still be obviously feeling the ramifications of so much of what has happened, whether they're personal because of loss or whether they're economic, or, there's so many different ways this can play itself out over the next, couple of years, decade, depending on how things go over the next couple of months or year. There's so many events. And so yeah, maybe we will never return back to normal in the sense of how we treat our climate, the things that we do that negatively affect our climate. Maybe those won't return to normal. They'll be better. That's possible.
Or at least different.
Different, yeah.
We were talking about time and climate. So my answer to that question is that, for all of our day-to-day struggles with time, it's still a very abstract idea. And I personally liked the idea of chronophobia and time illiteracy. That was part of the timefulness panel that I did with Dr. Marcia Bjornerud. And I just think that we don't have an appreciation for what time is. And if we think about cathedral thinkers and the people that would get involved in projects that they would never see done, that this is something that we could be doing today with climate, that we could be thinking of it as a legacy project versus something else. So my idea for time and climate is that it is important for us to be respectful of time and make sure that we are incorporating it into our decision making, how that comes together. So anyway, that's what my takeaway was. I think that was something. So is there a strong case to be made about behavior change? We live in a COVID era, and we had an opportunity to tackle this head on. Peter was on that. What do you think about behavior change in time?
Here's a trite statement: behavior change takes time.
Yeah, probably.
And if you think of any kind of habit that you try to develop, they say you got to be doing it. For example, a new routine in your life, you got to do it for a month or more before it gets embedded, right? Whether that's adopting a workout regime or a different diet or whatever. So, interestingly enough, we also live in an era where we're very much encouraged somehow to also live in the moment and to stop time, right? It's about looking younger. It's about cheating time to a certain degree, right? And viewing time as a bit of an enemy. And in many respects, I think that's a simplistic view. But when it comes to behavior change, I think, yes, we've made enormous leaps in this last couple of months.
Right.
I think if we all had the ability to sort of say, is that the ideal way that we want to change behavior or get people on board? I think we'd probably agree no. I think Julia's point that we can make these pivots quickly is a fair one, but I think we want to strike a balance, right, between not being so disruptive to people's reality that behavior change comes at a huge cost. Right. But, we don't, as I said earlier, we don't really have the luxury of a lot of time left. So I think as we've talked about, we've proven that we can change in a relatively short time frame. We're going to need to continue on that trajectory. And at the same time, we have to be mindful that those changes that we're making in the very present and near future are ones that are also going to be benefiting people down the road. And that seeing this ship turn around is going to take longer than we've seen with COVID, for sure.
I know for me, for one, I'm surprised at the scale of the change in behaviors that I never ever thought that we would ever see a planet scale change in direction. And to me, that was the hardest challenges for the climate crisis. And I think we said in a panel that the COVID crisis is very much a dress rehearsal for the climate crisis. So that there are lessons to be learned, and always scale to be considered in terms of matching the solution to the remedy. And the other thing from a Broto perspective is that we've always wanted to be adaptable and decentralized, and this was a way for us to embrace that in a big way and test the concept. So I think that locally, here at home, that we've been able to change our behaviors in response to this, and we should all be able to do it. Any other comments on behavior change?
I think that watching this sort of global scale change in behavior that was kind of mandated, right? We didn't have a choice.
Right.
I think it's also really important for people to sort of consider the possibility that we wanted this change because the alternative was unacceptable. And it forced us to say, there's no monument to the past. The right way to do it is the way we did it before, because that was just a non-starter. And I think if we sort of think about this idea that to get the future we want requires us to do something different, this example, even though it's not anything that we wanted to, nobody would have chosen to do it by way of global pandemic,
right,
is a really powerful message. Right? And if we can begin to think proactively about how to get the futures we want, whether it's related to climate or anything else that's a wicked problem, we've really improved the way we approach the world. And Broto's all about that.
I was struck by how many times during this conference that the words altruism and empathy came up, and like you're saying, Hilairy, similarly with the segments of, people who have certain jobs in our society, like people who work in healthcare, people who work in stores, in grocery stores, at gas stations, all these places which have remained open. For a lot of people, you might not have thought twice about the, gas station attendant or the clerk behind the meat counter, whatever. But all of a sudden, these groups of people, we're thinking a lot about them because they are putting themselves at risk so that everyone else can eat and drive and, do what they can do and have to do. And, I think the point's driven home by the fact that you're not allowed to enter a grocery store anymore unless you're wearing a mask. And of course, that's a rule, so you do it. But as soon as you walk in, you start to realize why you're doing it. It's not just because of the other shoppers. It's not just because of your own health, but it's because of, someone you might not have ever thought about before. And what if we, think about our planet that way? What if we can flip that and think, oh, geez, I haven't thought a lot about air quality or the ozone or this species that's dying out, etc. And so there's ways to inject altruism and empathy. We've done it with fellow human beings, during this crisis, certainly, and I think we can really learn from that.
Yeah, the word that I like is hubristic, used again in Timefulness, the panel that I did with Dr. Bjornerud. The idea that we have no respect for time and that we act in the Anthropocene as if we are the answer to everything, like we're impacting the planet in a way that is meaningful. I think that what we might be looking at is something about our place in time and our place in the climate strategies, because we don't, this planet, this big rock will continue, but we may not, and somehow we've got that backwards. Is that we're not really preserving our life, we're preserving a planet. No, the planet's going to be fine. We should be looking at this thin blue biosphere that we live in and preserving that. So, and yeah.
The thing I wonder, Ian, Hilairy, you brought up sort of, the actions that we took and how quickly we had to pivot and so on. And there was a moment in time where around the Friday, the 13th of March, or whatever, it was clear, like we're entering a new era, folks. The thing that I wonder is, when it comes to time and climate, when is that time gonna be for real climate action? Like, what is the clue? What is the trigger that we're gonna have to see? Because I read this article last week, which I posted on LinkedIn, about how the Amazon has now become a source and not a sink for carbon. And that's because the Amazon has been so, impacted by human development and so on, that what used to be one of the lungs of the planet is now a severely, compromised lung. Is that the point that we're all going to go, geez, time to take action? Is it some other natural disaster? Is it another pandemic that's somehow linked to actions that we're taking that also impact the climate? I don't know what it's going to be, but I know that around the 12th or 13th of March, something changed in the world around, that led to this new reality. And then I'm left wondering, what is it going to take? What time is it going to take until we as humans go, we have to act with the same resolve and coordination that we have around COVID, because our lives depend on it. And guess what? Our lives depend on it.
So the old joke in my household was always, we're not saving lives here. And all of a sudden, the things we're doing every day that we didn't do before, they really are saving lives. And I think we need to figure out when, to Peter's point, we see the same thing with respect to the planet, right? We are saving the planet here, people. In my mind, I think it's tied to Arctic sea ice, and that's not just because my science is there, but because that's a point of no return that is pretty recognizable. But it's also a point you don't want to get to, right? And so this is one of those interesting problems when you kind of talk about the pacing of geological cycles, or the flattening of a curve, and getting people to think about the rate at which things happen, right? That the obvious, oh, yeah, that's the March 13th from the climate perspective, is probably a point you do not want to get to, right? We didn't want to get there with respect to a virus.
Right.
So now we got to ask people to think about, how do we preempt things that are going to happen down the road, because they understand what happened before. And now we're asking people to sort of think, where am I in a timeline, and what are my actions going to do? And that's a super complicated thing to think about.
I sense that art and science in partnership could play a pivotal role in trying to get people to think in the long term. If you think about government and business that have been given the leadership role in trying to make us a more sustainable planet, I mean, they're looking at quarterlies, they're looking at 2 or 3 year growth cycles. They're looking in the short term, and the climate is a very long term play. And so I think that art and science are better equipped to lead this quest, that you're unconstrained by. So I wondered if we thought how art and science work together to try and deal with these times.
Yeah, I mean, the wonderful thing about art is that it's unrestricted in definition, but also in scale and in form. And this was brought up on a few different sessions, the idea that if a scientist has an idea, but they can't get through IRB, or they can't, get a granting agency to fund it, why use the platform of science? Why not use the platform of art? Art is a vehicle. Art can do things in the real world. And, so I thought that was a really interesting idea, which could be applied to, how do we make people think about time? How do we include people in an experience which embodies an idea about time and about climate? On another panel, pieces that were mentioned included I think it's a website or an app that shows you how you might age over time. And, a piece by this artist, Agnes Dennis, who planted a forest, and obviously that takes place over time, over generations. And so I think really that's one way to think about it, is using art as the vehicle, as the thing which can create an experience or create a forest or what have you, not not just for the creation of it, but for the experience of people who are involved in it. And yeah, it occurs to me that last year in Broto we talked about scale.
Right.
This year we're talking about time. That's still a scale. That's like the biggest scale of all. Yeah.
Any other comments? So did we make the case that time is relevant to climate?
Oh yeah.
Well, of course, we're biased.
We are biased.
There's only one way to answer this question.
We don't know that there's climate unless we know that there's a past and a future, right? Climate only exists embedded within the concept of time. Otherwise, it's all just weather. And you get up in the morning and it's raining, or it's not. It's only if it rains, for an extended period of time that we have a concept of climate. And I actually think people get that. People understand that intuitively. And we could capitalize on that in art and science and, in the way we think about the world.
Just to refine slightly, that answer that we gave, which of course we did. I'd say we've started, right? We've started to make the case, and hopefully this discussion will spur other people to start to add to the dialogue. I think we started to present a good case to the court of public opinion, and now it's time for others to weigh in and add further evidence or further perspective to it. But I think it would be self-serving if we said we made the case, but we certainly have started to make the case, and hopefully through this dialogue and other sessions that we've had previous years and years to come, we will continue to build on that. But there's no question that Hilary's comment, weather is today, climate is something that takes place over time.
Yeah, the Broto concept is always about starting a conversation, whether there's a meaningful way to bring art and science together through process or through language, whether we can use art as a vector for scale for climate remedies. I mean, that was last year's conversation when we were thinking about movies and film and streaming and how it works without borders and how it might actually be a model for growing our climate remedies. And this year, we started a conversation about whether time is relevant to our decision making this year. So I really think that what we've done is started a conversation, tried to make it more mainstream, tried to bring in some new ideas and some new people and get the conversation started. I want to leave our conference with some challenges to the audience. What can they do to think this way or engage this way? Do you have any ways for people to develop?
Well, my challenge to all of the scientists out there is to find a way to work with an artist in a meaningful, substantive, years-long way. Write them in on grants. Be creative. Other scientists have figured out how to do it. Maybe Hilairy can give you some advice. But there are ways to do this work that treats a collaboration like more than a side project, like more than something fun to do on a weekend. Artists are extremely underutilized creative thinkers who are not confined by boxes. So that's my challenge to the scientist audience members and to the artist audience members or anyone else who works in a creative way. Tell us your ideas. Get in touch. Send in your ideas.
Right.
And keep this conversation going between now and the next version of Broto, whether it's virtual or physical.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would challenge people to take on board some of the things that we've talked about and think about how to apply that to your own life. How to apply more cathedral thinking to the way that you think about your family, to the way that you think about your community, for example. It's fine to live in the present, and certain religions like Buddhism, is very much about the present and not being distracted necessarily by the future or other things going on in your busy mind. But this is one of those cases where I think we do want people to be thinking, not about today, thinking about how their actions today impact the future, and that's something that we all need to be doing more of. So my challenge is that people actually try and apply some of this to their own lives.
Yeah, I agree with both Peter and Julia. One of the biggest challenges is to ask yourself, how does this thing that I plan to do, how does that play out over a week, a year, 10 years, 100 years? Who is it going to impact and how? And every decision we make has those timescales associated with it. And we can choose to make decisions that will act to the good down the road. Getting back to the sort of art science thing, I think it's one of the rare moments where two of the most creative endeavors that humans have ever really engaged in, right? Both of them generate new knowledge of the world around them, right? Whether that's an unknown scientific fact or a piece of creative action that didn't exist before, right? Those two ways of creating new knowledge in the world together are incredibly powerful. And we don't know exactly how to do that in a way that's productive of something for the future. But I think that's what we need.
And that's what the aspirational aspects of Broto are. I would say engage in the big ideas of time, build something for the benefits that benefits the future, invest in strategies that actively enhance versus diminish the future, our long-term outlooks for climate. Join our conversation, like us on Facebook, get on our newsletter, and bring us your big ideas, because I think that that's really where we excel, is when we get smart people in the same room together or in the same virtual room. And I wanted to thank you guys very much for your support, ongoing support, work here at this weekend. I wanted to say a special thank you to our attendees from all over the world who hung out with us virtually, and we look forward to engaging you in the Q&A, and see you soon.
Thanks for joining, everyone.
Thank you so much. It was great to be part of this, and thank you, Ian.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you, Ian, and thanks for everyone who joined us.
Thank you. So, Julia, any final thoughts? What we didn't cover off in that last 48 minutes?
Well, I think, as usual, we're so great at starting conversations, and I really hope that this online format has allowed, everyone who's tuned in virtually to start conversations with each other. There's been some really great tidbits happening in the chat, and audience members trying to connect with one another. And to me, seeing that is awesome. That's what needs to happen. We can't just have this nice weekend-long event and then go back to our lives. We need to carry things forward. We need to make changes. We need to spread our conversations further. So thank you, everyone, for just being really enthusiastic and supportive of Broto during this time, which has not been easy to switch over, but we're glad we could be here.
Yeah, I would say as the producer that there's a tremendous amount of goodwill that has come toward us this year. I wanted to keep the so make sure that we could do something. This virtual delivery is the way we were able to do that. And to my surprise, we have 435 attendees from 30 different countries. And these are people who would not otherwise meet us. So I want to say thank you, welcome, thank you for the goodwill, thank you for the participation, because this is what's starting some of these great big ideas that we start to germinate here at Broto. So we're still having a little bit of audio there. We're back. So let's get to some of the questions. Sorry, I'm just catching up. So people actually like the hybrid conference here, and there's a lot of questions about how we're going to be partnering with other groups in that kind of initiative. Today, Broto has been an unaffiliated organization. We're a non-academic organization. We're a creative. And I think that in these early days, we've just been trying to find our feet, frankly. So I think this is a great year for us to start to expand and work with some of these other organizations that are doing some of this great work. I mean, Julia's initiative is very busy doing these kinds of multidisciplinary works, and there are other organizations out there that are doing. Leonardo, who's also presenting this year, did a great job and does a great job in terms of. So I think there's some synergies to it, and I just want to make sure that we preserve our uniqueness, which is about the conversation, which is what we did this year. Hilairy, are you back? No. Okay.
I think Hilairy may be trapped between the present and the future.
Might be. She might be caught in limbo, trans-dimensional world. All right. Well, any final moments, any final ideas, Julia and Peter, and we'll wrap it up and we'll say thank you to everybody.
Well, I think it goes without saying that that this work is going to require, obviously, the involvement and the enthusiasm of a whole bunch of people. I think you've started something good here, Ian. It's been interesting to see this conference evolve over the last 3 years. I've seen a lot of great comments, so I think you've latched onto something, and I think the whole notion of kind of crossing the art-science divide is really critical, not just in this domain. I think in a whole lot of other domains as well, because we tend to kind of keep, I'm a sciencey maths person or I'm an arts person, and we sort of view those as two separate worlds. And I think the reality is that the more that we can cross-pollinate between people, cultures, milieus, domains, whatever you want to call it, the better, because ultimately these challenges require us as humans to draw from those various disciplines.
Yes. I would urge all the artist attendees out there. I was just going to say, I would urge all the artist attendees out there. I know you're out there, and I know there are many of you. You're a free agent, and you have creative, bright ideas. You are adept at crossing disciplines and learning new languages, learning new skill sets. That's what you do all the time when you make your work. So if you have an idea about sustainability or some new STEAM learning education module, or you have an idea for a public artwork that relates to climate change, start acting on it. This is the time to do it. It's actually really much easier to get in touch with scientists right now if you're looking to collaborate, because guess what? Everyone's home and people have less meetings and less research to do. So you actually may have a much higher rate of getting your cold emails answered. So why wait, right? We don't have the time. I think that's what Peter was saying earlier in another panel. We're out of time, so act now.
Hilairy, are you able to comment on your last thoughts about the conference? Still in limbo. A few people have asked me about what are we going to do out of all of this, and as with every other year, I've been doing white papers and other content around the ideas that have come up here. I'm late on one from last year, and I will work on this one as fast as I can. The idea is to try and create a mainstream document where we can outline some of these big ideas in a format that would hopefully spark more conversation. So that's one of our outcomes. We also have plans to do this again more frequently. So if you were a fan of this, please stand by for an announcement about something maybe in the fall. And with that, I just wanted to say, repeat again, a heartfelt thank you to all of the people that made this come together. My advisory board is amazing. My board of directors is amazing. My sponsors are amazing. And there's only with the village can we make this thing happen. So it is with deep regard and respect to say thank you to you all. And please send me an email if you've got a question. Ian at Broto.eco. And there is a Google Doc if you want to add your name to the contact list. So keep well, stay safe, and we will see you again. Ciao.
Bye, everyone.